Hello, and welcome to Overthinking Eurovision. I'm Matt Rather, and I'm kind of bummed out, chat. We're going to talk all about this year's contest, but first, a small bit of housekeeping. This is our last video for 2025. Well, it's our second to last. We have one last treat for you coming soon. But then we're going back into hibernation until the national finals start up again. The YouTube algorithm really doesn't like this. They punish you if you're not releasing videos all the time. So if you want us in your feed when we pop back up in 2026, please subscribe to the channel now. Okay, where was I? Oh yeah, I'm bummed out, chat. Last year, Eurovision was a slow-motion train wreck, with numerous artists, including the winner, speaking out against the contest. The last-minute disqualification of fan favorite Joost was the international Klein blue-colored icing on the cake. On top of that, Sweden was unable to deliver even one member of ABBA for the 50th anniversary of Waterloo. Instead, they did a lavish production number about executive supervisor Martin Oosterdal, a man whom the fandom was ready to tar and feather at the time. When you have to delete your own interval act from the internet, it's safe to say Eurovision didn't go the way that you were hoping. On July 1st, 2024, Variety published a summary of the changes the EBU was planning to make for 2025. They quoted Deputy Director General and Media Director Jean-Philippe de Tonder as saying, "We've seen on stage countries at war almost embracing one another, because this stage is apolitical. So it shows that it's about respecting one another, respecting the diversity, and respecting the inclusion." Now, when de Tonder says this stage is apolitical, maybe he means the literal stage, which is just a bunch of LED monitors and stray pieces of cork. But if he means Eurovision itself is apolitical, that would be news to us. We made a whole video about the ways Eurovision gets political, and it would be news to the mods of the Eurovision subreddit, who had to lock the whole channel after the grand final this year. The next day, they explained, "The truth is that, with current events being what they are and with online discussions being what they are, it is almost unheard of that people are able to discuss and communicate in a way that makes everyone in our diverse community feel safe." Je ne sais pas, de Tonder. It sounds pretty political to me. In April, 26 members of the European Parliament asked the EBU to consider excluding Israel. After all, it excluded Russia in 2022. But the EBU repeatedly explained that it was a non-political entity, and the suspension of the Russian broadcasters from the EBU was due to persistent breaches of membership obligations. As long as the Israeli broadcaster followed the rules, the EBU couldn't ban it, no matter what public opinion said. But here's the thing. When the EBU banned Russia, they told us exactly why, and it wasn't breaches of membership obligations. In a letter that is still on the EBU website today, they explained, "The inclusion of a Russian entry in this year's contest would bring the competition into disrepute." Before making this decision, the EBU took time to consult widely among its membership. That makes it sound like this wasn't about Russia breaking the rules, it was about the EBU member stations not wanting Russia around. In another video, we talked about one reason why the EBU is sticking by Israel. If their broadcaster Khan gets kicked out of Eurovision, the right-wing Netanyahu government will probably eliminate it entirely. But there might be an even simpler explanation. In 2022, Russia was sent to the Gulag because that's what the EBU members wanted. So it stands to reason that Israel is still in Eurovision this year because that's what the EBU members want. Oh, not all the members. RTVE seems ready to mutiny, going so far as to insert this message into their broadcast. But it's a decent bet that at least two of the big five nations, Germany and the United Kingdom, would strongly oppose any effort to ditch Israel. And so the EBU was in a difficult position. It couldn't exclude Israel without the support of its members, but keeping Israel around infuriated a lot of its fans. And in the end, there was nothing they could do except for organizing an internal crisis management team, eliminating the group press conferences, and locking Martin Oosterdal in a closet somewhere. Yuval Raphael skipped all the pre-parties and didn't get invited to do any of the fun TikToks. She was confronted with protesters everywhere she went, including one who made a throat-slitting gesture at her. More alarmingly, protesters tried to rush the stage during the grand final, and a security guard had paint thrown at him. Threatening the artists or the crew is never okay, no matter the cause. But of course, Yuval had seen way, way worse. On October 7th, 2023, she survived the Hamas terrorist attack by hiding under a pile of dead bodies for 8 hours. Her song is a tribute to the memory of the friends she lost that day, and you can and should have sympathy for her and all the victims, even if you are horrified by what Israel has done in response. Now, whether for political or artistic reasons, the juries gave Israel a middling 60 points. Up in the control room, I'll bet they were breathing a sigh of relief. They had had their chocolate babka and eaten it too. And then this happened.
297 points!
That's actually slightly fewer points than they got last year. The difference is that last year, Rim Tim Tagi Dim was a televoting lightning rod that scored 337 points, and this year, the non-Israel televotes were split more evenly between Tommy Cash, Kai, JJ, and others. And all of a sudden, Israel's lead looked like it might be insurmountable. Let's back up for a second. In 2022, Eurovision ended with a jaw-dropping press release announcing the contest had discovered a massive scheme to trade jury votes in the semifinals. In response, the EBU made the semifinals televoting only. But this had an interesting outcome. All the fan favorites made it to the finals because the fans were the only ones deciding, but many of the jury bait songs got eliminated. And so at the finals, the fans were split between all the crowd-pleasing songs they'd selected, and the juries had a smaller group of jury-pleasing songs to focus on. The end result is that the jury vote is now more likely than ever to decide the outcome. And then, in October 2023, the war in Gaza began. For the past 2 years, there's been a swell of televoting support for Israel. I don't want to imply that these two Israeli ballads are bad songs and no one actually likes them. In fact, they were exactly the kind of song that historically does well at Eurovision. But I do think Israel has gotten a lot of televotes from people who support it politically, whether or not they support the songs musically. And if you spent any time online this year watching Eurovision videos, you probably saw one of the many ads the Israeli government was running. They even ran an ad in Times Square, which is A, very expensive, and B, not in Europe. Currently, there's nothing against the rules about a broadcaster whipping votes like this, but that might change next year. Only one day after Eurovision, several broadcasters were already requesting a review of the whole televoting process. Now, honestly, I'm not sure how much of the Israeli televote was actually affected by these ads. Maybe it's a ton, or maybe they barely moved the needle. That's the problem with astroturfing support. Once you do it even a little bit, the results will always have an asterisk. So where does that leave us? For the last 2 years, the jury vote has been more focused than the televote, and there's a massive Israel televoting block. What it adds up to is this. Until something changes, the winner of Eurovision will either be the jury winner or Israel. There is no option 3. And honestly, that doesn't seem sustainable. This time, Austria managed to eke out a win, but if Switzerland had done a different staging and siphoned off even a little bit of the televoting love, things could have gone very differently. And while banning Israel might cause some of the EBU's members to quit, Israel winning would also cause some of the EBU's members to quit. This year, the EBU barely held things together.
Remain calm! All is well!
In 2026, something will change, one way or another. And on that cheery note, let's talk about the winner. How did a singer who had never written a song before come out of nowhere to win Eurovision? Well, it helps to have an amazing voice that can shift seamlessly from pop to opera, and by the way, we haven't shown this clip for a while.
My friend.
Never gets old. But, of course, the obvious comparison here is the person who shared the stage with JJ at the end of the show. Nemo also wasn't afraid to get really high. High AF, as the kids say. And the link between these two people is Taya. Flashback to June 2nd, 2023. Only a couple weeks before, Taya had represented Austria at Eurovision, but she was already back at another songwriting camp, and she tweeted out this. I have a feeling there's a 99.99% chance we heard the Swiss entry for next year's Eurovision yesterday. That song turned out to be The Code. Theo didn't write it, but it makes sense she'd love it. Her own Eurovision song combined pop with moments of opera. What strikes me about this tweet is the certainty. Probably greater certainty than Nemo themselves felt. Theo knew they had cracked the code in more ways than one, and so it's not surprising that she'd want to write her own spin on this formula. In fact, Wasted Love isn't her only song in this style this year. She co-wrote a song for Cristi Spiteri, who finished second to Mirjana Conte in Malta's national final, and it too goes from pop to the top. So when JJ, with his countertenor range, asked her to write him a Eurovision entry, Theo must have been like, we already talked about how the only path to victory now is winning the juries. What Theo figured out back in June 2023 was that merely singing a song well wasn't enough to do that anymore. You have to show off. You had to write a song that nobody except you could perform. Well, you and Nemo, I guess. And the similarities might go beyond vocal pyrotechnics. JJ's sound and performance style challenge stereotypes of what people think a male performer should be like. Between this and Lucio Corsi finishing 5th, 2025 was a good year for guys pushing back on traditional expressions of masculinity. Which means it was not a good year to be a wild and crazy guy. Sorry, Gojo. We'll see you on TikTok. Meanwhile, congratulations, Theo. Hopefully after co-writing the winning song, you can afford slightly better than gas station champagne. And congratulations, JJ. Having this as your first songwriting credit sets a pretty high bar for yourself. But as a friend of ours from Croatia once said, do your best, take a chance. There are two types of Eurovision biographies. The first one is, this person learned music at an early age, and this is the first song they've ever recorded. The second one is, this guy is a beloved cultural institution in their home country, and tattoo parlors will put his face on any part of your body for half price. I have an embarrassing confession to make. Behind the scenes, we had started to doubt Tommy Cash knew what he was doing. Yes, we did an entire 45-minute video about how he is a branding and social media expert, but after he won the national final, he heavily implied that he had big changes planned. When the rehearsal footage was released, it turned out the performance was almost the same routine. He didn't even use the Jekyll and Hyde thing from the music video. And then we wondered whether this act was really enough to get the job done. Pretend you don't know Tommy Cash is an acclaimed indie rapper. Pretend you don't know he was boy number 43 in the Charlie XCX Boys video right after will.i.am. Then what you have here is a goofy guy in a goofy outfit singing a goofy song. I mean, how different is that really from what Windows 95 Man did last year? And sure, Tommy Cash is popular, but he's not that popular. On Spotify, none of his songs have more than 20 million streams, which puts him exponentially below Ollie Alexander. And we all know what kind of public support Ollie mustered. But it turns out that Tommy Cash knows more about winning the crowd than a YouTube channel that's barely accumulated 35,000 subscribers in 17 years. He ended the night with the second highest televote total, behind only Israel. Maybe you could chalk this up to him successfully mobilizing his fans in a way that Ollie didn't. But Tommy also got 98 jury points. That's more than a ton of the objectively better singers like Erika, Sisal, or Škodra Elektronika. And incidentally, the fact that the juries only gave Škodra Elektronika 45 points is a crime that must be investigated in The Hague. I do think it's interesting that, behind Israel, the two most successful songs with the public were the two funny songs. They're actually the most successful funny songs in the contest for years. Do you count Toy in 2018 as a funny song? If you don't, you have to go back to the Grannies in 2012 for a funny song that did better than Tommy and Kai. We don't have a theory about this yet, but it seems like novelty songs might be back in a big way. And we couldn't be happier. The real beneficiary of Tommy Cash's success might be the EBU itself. Ollie's dismal result last year seemed like a cautionary tale for successful artists considering a Eurovision detour. But Tommy leveraged his celebrity to win votes and made a lot of new fans in the process. We're curious if this leads to other established artists taking the plunge in 2026. On the other hand, if we learned one thing about Tommy Cash this year, it's that he's one of a kind. Whatever he just did, I wouldn't bet on anyone else doing it again. Out of all the artists at Eurovision, Kai may have the most songwriting experience. Over the past 12 years, they've recorded 7 studio albums, written and performed 2 original musicals, and even created an alter ego group that performs rockabilly music.
We are virgins. Born to burn. Yeah, we are virgins. Born to burn.
If we'd had the time to do one more deep dive video this year, it would have been about these guys. But, we can do a medium dive right now. Kai is from the small Finnish town of Vura, which they talk about in their 2016 song, Come to the Village.
Vi har ett träsk i skola och mycket mer. Nej, minus skolan, för han la ner.
Tommy Cash also came from a rural part of Estonia, which he depicted in a 2015 song, Leave Me Alone.
Stuck in this dump when I should be in Miami.
There's a wee difference in tone here. Kai pokes fun at their tiny little town, but they are genuinely proud of it. The last line of the song is, "You can take the boy out of the village, but not the village out of the boy." To which Tommy Cash says, "Hold my saku." In 2019, he explained, "I want to do escapism. I want to take people out of their lives to this magical world where you can disappear for a couple of hours and get inspired, like in a movie." Kai does the exact opposite. All their songs are about the boring, humdrum, mundane parts of life. There's one about helping your parents with their computer problems, the neighbor who steals your mail, the simple joy of watching construction workers, or the anguish of getting your Nissan stuck in a ditch. This song, Nissan Bromsa, begins with a prologue I think is very revealing.
Rodrins beslut om att hitta lägg på vinterringan kom att stå vår vardagshjälte dyrt.
This idea of an everyday hero is often associated with James Joyce. Ulysses is a novel that retells the Odyssey as a single day in the life of an ordinary, middle-aged Dublin man. In a letter to his brother, Joyce explained, "Don't you think there is a certain resemblance between the mystery of the Mass and what I'm trying to do? I mean that I am trying to give people some kind of intellectual pleasure or spiritual enjoyment by converting the bread of everyday life into something that has a permanent artistic life of its own." And as pretentious as it might seem to explain Bara Bada Bastu through the words of James Joyce, I honestly think that's Kai's artistic project right there. Tommy Cash wants to let people escape from their lives. Kai wants to take those lives and turn them into joyous art. And because of that approach, there's something very accessible about Kai's music. We may not all be able to identify with the giddy joy of Sisal, the crushing despair of JJ, or the stay-aliveosity of Parg. But even if you're not a regular sauna goer, you understand exactly where Kai is coming from. It's a song about the simple pleasure of doing something relaxing with friends. And the friends part is important here. A lot of Kai's work is about coming together to do something, as a group, as a village, as a society. Their 2018 musical, Gampemark, is about a town that cuts itself off from the world and struggles to find the balance between individualism and community. It was the law of Jante, but jaunty. And Bara Bada Bastu makes it clear that a large part of the sauna's appeal is that it's a shared ritual. The British cultural anthropologist Victor Turner popularized the term communitas to refer to a kind of bonding that takes place when people undergo an experience that breaks down barriers and creates a radical equality. Spontaneous communitas has something magical about it. Structural action swiftly becomes arid and mechanical if those involved in it are not periodically immersed in the regenerative abyss of communitas.
English, Doc.
What he's saying is that adulting is a drag.
You want me to deprioritize my current reports until you advise of a status upgrade?
And to really connect with people, you have to find a way to step outside the roles society places on you.
Welcome to Fight Club.
For Kai, it's entering a sauna and enduring the heat together. The sauna is what Turner would call an unstructured space, in which everyone is stripped down to their essence, figuratively and literally. The New York Times published an article about Finnish culture in early May, and the writer noted the communal nature of the sauna. In Finland, sauna is not a means to an end. The point seems to be the act itself, sitting in nude serenity among family, friends, and strangers, safe in the bone-deep sense of trust that such an idyll both requires and reinforces. What's interesting is that one of the main ways people achieve communitas in the modern world is through music. A concert or a rave is another unstructured space you can lose yourself in. So while Kai is singing about one type of communitas, they are forging another type of communitas. In a lot of ways, this was an atypical Eurovision song, but at its core, Bara Bara Bastu is about coming together to share an experience, and there's nothing more Eurovision than that. So to our everyday heroes, congratulations on finishing 4th, and I think I know the perfect way to celebrate. Oh, I was actually going to suggest going to see Final Destination Bloodlines, but sauna makes a lot more sense. Let's go with that. We've talked about the top 4 finishers. Now, we have to skip down to 11th place to talk about Erika Wikman. This is not where we were hoping to see her. Now, in our semi-final preview video, special guest star ESC Tom talked about how juries get a little puritanical with sexual songs. But honestly, I'm not sure that's what happened here. Ich komme comed in 10th place with the juries, which is a pretty fair result, considering all the artistic songs and powerhouse singers this year. This was always meant to seduce the televoters. Check out the UMK results. Erika lost the jury vote to Goldilocks, but she dominated the televoting. That didn't happen at Eurovision. Maybe there were just too many songs competing for televoting love, including her fellow Finns. Maybe Erika climaxed too soon, with the song coming out in January. But I want to highlight something. On a night of enormous props, backup dancers, and theatrical effects, Erika's performance was beautifully simple. It was just her, the crowd, and a series of mic stands she discarded like ex-lovers. And it was a reminder that if you have charisma, you don't need anything else. But it never hurts to have a big mic. So speaking of Eurovision stagings, the meta is continuing to evolve rapidly. From the very beginning, Eurovision was a made-for-television event. Thus the name. But the performances were staged first and foremost for the live audience, and that barely changed into the modern era of the contest. Fokas Evangelinos is the Thomas Gesson of Eurovision stagings. He directed Greece's winning song in 2005, Russia's winning song in 2008, and lots of fan favorites since then. Shout out to My Lucky Day, which is basically a vaudeville routine. But none of these performances depended on camera work to bring them to life. The camera was just there to show you what the audience was seeing. And that's what you'd expect from somebody who started out as a dancer and a choreographer. We can debate when that started to change, but check out Euphoria in 2012. You know what you don't see in this performance? The audience, or even much of the stage. It might have been shot in a television studio. More and more in recent years, performances are being designed for the camera first and the live audience second. And that's why the new hot director for Eurovision is a filmmaker with no theatrical background. Sergio Jaén was barely out of film school a year ago when Ireland's broadcaster hired him to direct Bambi Thug's music video with only a week to prepare. After he nailed it, he pitched himself as the director of their live performance too. You can instantly tell that this is a performance that started out as a storyboard. Every shot feels composed. Here, they had to move a camera along with the prop. This isn't a live performance that happened to be recorded. This is a music video that happened to be shot live. At Basel, Sergio was part of the creative team for 3 acts: Finland, Cyprus, and Austria. Finland is actually pretty minimalist, but Cyprus makes use of a changing aspect ratio that the live crowd would miss completely. And Austria is basically a preview of Christopher Nolan's version of The Odyssey. But the most cinematic staging of the night was the host country, which actually used its own camera to make sure their song looked completely different. Creative director Theo Adams explained, "The image is soft and expressive, filmed on a full-frame cinema camera using the exact same Zeiss superspeed lenses from the 1970s that were used to shoot films like Taxi Driver and Raging Bull. These lenses create blooming highlights, delicate flares, and a shallow depth of field that gently isolates Zoe in the frame." This was one of the hottest stagings of Eurovision 2025, and it was barely a staging in the traditional sense. At the end of her performance, the camera pulls back a little, and you can see somebody holding up a light. This person isn't part of the official Eurovision production team, she's part of the Swiss delegation. Technically, she's a performer. We've seen performers that didn't perform before. In fact, Gojo had somebody hidden to help with the costume change. But as far as we know, this is the first time a Eurovision delegation has used a performer as a member of the camera crew. This was a radical new approach, and for a few minutes it looked like it paid off. 214 points from the juries was the second highest total of the night. And then came the televoting.
0 points!
214 to 0 is quite the spread. And first off, we're wrong about a lot of things, but we nailed this one. And that makes this song perfect for the curse of the host country. Zoe is almost daring you to hate it, and she's totally fine with that. Actually, I'm not sure she was totally fine with it. People are going to be theorizing about Switzerland's cuckoo split for a while, but I think the staging must have been at least part of the reason. Look at the Theo Adams quote again. He's talking like the fancy lens is a substitute for choreography. But people aren't going to vote for 1970s depth of field. You actually have to perform. Incidentally, this now marks 2 years in a row that Theo Adams has directed a Eurovision song that got 0 televoting points. And he's not the only Theo who had a disappointing Eurovision.
I've got golden locks and eyes so captivating. I'm famous for my beauty. Who am I?
I know everyone wants us to overthink the songs that actually competed in the Eurovision final, but we have been obsessively piecing together what happened with Cyprus this year, and we have a theory for you. In March, Cyprus revealed its internally selected Eurovision song, and they laid down a challenge. The song, produced with mystery and intensity in mind, invites listeners to uncover a hidden truth that will only be revealed on the Eurovision Song Contest stage in May. So this was a riddle we were invited to solve. A lot of people thought it was Narcissus. In our semifinal 1 preview video, we predicted it was Adonis. Other people thought it might be the famous Leonardo da Vinci drawing of the guy in the circle. I'm kidding, nobody in the world thought that. But on May the 4th, there was a great disturbance in the force, as if thousands of Eurofans cried out with one voice, "Huh?" Is about the Vitruvian Man. Not just the drawing, not just the ideal, but what he represents. The Instagram post promised, "Every lyric is a clue," and in retrospect, it makes perfect sense. I mean, my desire and my love got me in trouble. Everyone knows the famous story about how this drawing had a forbidden romance with the Mona Lisa that Leonardo was working on across the room. And robbed by jealousy and cheated by my enemy. That's a clear reference to when the Vitruvian Man was betrayed by its former best friend, the drawing of the helicopter. Curse you, drawing of the helicopter! Curse you and your black steampunk heart! Okay, what the is actually going on here? Let's go over the timeline. The song and the artist were selected in late August, and let's go ahead and assume that the lyrics did have a specific person in mind from the very beginning. But check out what Theo says about the Vitruvian Man.
We had the idea and the concept of the Vitruvian Man since November.
November? That's 3 months after the song was picked. So assuming that these are the original lyrics, they weren't written about the Vitruvian Man. So why the change? In autumn, Cyprus called up the hottest Eurovision director on the planet, Sergio Jaén. Presumably they told him who the song was about, but Sergio apparently had another idea.
Sergio came up with this concept of the Vitruvian Man.
Sergio told the Eurovision Fun podcast, "I accepted Cyprus' proposal because I heard the song first and said, yes, this is something we have to do. The main reason was the possibilities the song gives me to create something different on stage. Theo is a very open-minded artist. That open-minded thing suggests that the Vitruvian Man idea wasn't what Cyprus was originally looking for. But you have to remember that Sergio was red hot. Junior Eurovision 2024 happened on November 16th, and Sergio's interval act stole the show right out from under all those kids. And so I think that even though Cyprus already had a concept for the song, they agreed to change it because it was the only way to get Sergio on board. Sergio seemed to have the Vitruvian Man on the brain last year. Check out the staging for Goldilocks at UMK. This is arguably more like the Vitruvian Man than Shh was. But here's the really mysterious thing. Theo says they came up with the Vitruvian Man thing in November, but the song wasn't released until March. So why wouldn't they change the lyrics to match the new concept? Well, apparently, Theo recorded his song in mid-November. This article is dated November 16th, the day of Eurovision Junior, when we know that Sergio was very busy. So here's my theory. Theo Evan went off to Athens to record his song about Narcissus or Adonis or whoever. When they got back to Cyprus, they had a message from Sergio Hayen, saying he'll direct the performance, but he wants to make it about the Vitruvian Man. They accepted because you don't say no when the captain of the football team invites you to prom, and maybe for a minute they considered rewriting the lyrics and re-recording the song. But considering they probably had to pay Sergio a ton, maybe they didn't have the money to start again from scratch. And this explains why the songwriters haven't spoken about this clever riddle they wrote now that the cat is out of the bag. Trust me, we tried to get them to talk. I think that Cyprus asked them not to comment on the lyrics because there's really no explanation that makes total sense. And I can kind of understand getting stuck with lyrics that don't really match the staging. The creative process can be messy. But what really annoys me is this announcement. That was in March, when they knew the lyrics didn't match the staging anymore. But they went ahead and told people it was a riddle they could solve. And guess what? No one solved it because it didn't make any sense. So don't you tell me to shh, okay? You shh. And those are our thoughts on Eurovision 2025. But we're not done for the year quite yet. We'll be back soon with the big reveal of the Overthinking Eurovision Awards, some special thank yous to everyone who helped out, and maybe a surprise or two. We'll see you next time. Stay alivers. So does the dabbing song mean dabbing is cool again, or is it ironic dabbing? Just tell me if I should start dabbing again.